All right, me. It is Boxing Day 2025, and I have finished reading Reginald Rose's 12 Angry Men. Um, this is the play version that was, I think, done in like 1960s, early 1960s somewhere. If I remember the story correctly, this was originally written as a radio show and radio drama, and then a couple of years later was then made into the black and white film 12 Angry Men, and then was adapted to be a play, right? So, this is really the third version of this same story. It is perhaps one of the most interesting character studies. And what does it mean to be a character, and what does it mean to be, someone locked in a room, right? Because the entire story is that they are 12 jurors that are proceeding over a murder case, right? And we as the audience get to see only the key principal points of evidence. We don't get to see everything, right? And it is just them in basically two rooms, right? The main room and then the washroom, for 2 hours of our lives, debating whether or not this kid should be tried guilty and therefore be given the death sentence, right? And that's really what this is all about, right? Rose paints, I think, is a very, very kind and very hopeful picture of our justice system, in which, right, that any trial can eventually find its way to finding this verdict of, and the kindness of, beyond a reasonable doubt, right? It's a very, very kind portrait of the way that we want our justice system to work, right? That it is the people that have made America, coming from all different backgrounds, all different stories, all different prejudices, coming together to listen to logic and to reason, and to decide if someone really deserves punishment beyond any shadow of a doubt. It's a very, very hopeful picture of all of this. Certainly, I think I'll talk about the end, my own thoughts on that, but really it centers around two main jurors. It is mostly centered around the eighth juror, who is initially the only one that says a not guilty verdict, and the third juror, who is the last holdout of saying a guilty verdict, right? And it kind of goes through going through the opposite version of what a trial is, right? Because it is a guilty or an innocent until proven guilty, whereas in this, it is guilty until reasonable doubt is proven, right? And it is just a thing of, like, the eighth juror sticks his neck out and says, look, if no one else is willing to give this kid a shot, let's put it all to a vote. I will abstain. If anyone else votes not guilty, then we'll continue. If everyone else votes guilty, then I will also vote guilty. We'll be done with this. And it is just this slow process of bit by bit by bit, showing that there is some sort of reasonable doubt in the testimony, right? And it's this very, very interesting thing, right, in which you are looking at characters who have very, very intense emotions and prejudices about the way that things should be, and then asking them to interact with one another and only interact with one another, right? They have nothing else to do. There is nowhere else to go besides interact with one another. There's a great deal of discussion about xenophobia and about racism and about classism. And that's what a lot of the main focus becomes, is that you have, right, your two main spokespeople for guilty and not guilty. The way it is written is that the eighth juror is he's just someone who wants to hear more, who wants to have more information, wants to have a further discussion, doesn't want to settle the fact that this kid's life is going to be taken away from him, is not willing to just settle that immediately, right? It just wants to hear more information, and that's why he's kind of proposed. Versus the third juror, who becomes the main spokesman for the guilty verdict, starts going from this, oh yeah, we all see it, to these kind of people deserve to die, right? And it's a very, very quick switch, but it's a switch that I think is it's incredibly important to note, right? Is that this is as soon as he feels like he is on the back foot, he tries to get everyone else's prejudices involved, and what he eventually realizes is that his prejudices and what he believes is not the same as everyone else's, right? Because we eventually find out that there's other jurors that have grown up in the slums that take great offense to, the third juror and the 10th juror saying that all these people just deserve to die anyways. That there's a real problem, that the fact that they are having children more quickly, that they are reproducing at a faster rate, is then a problem, and therefore if we get a chance to get rid of one of them, we should, right? All this eventually comes into play, and one of the things that also eventually comes into play is that very early on, I mean, this is like, it's really only 2 scenes and 2 acts. It's Act 1, Scene 1, and Act 2, Scene 1. But what we eventually kind of see is, or actually rather quickly see, is they start talking about kids at one point, and the third juror admits that he has a kid, and that his kid is, like he had beat his kid at one point, and the kid ran away from him, and he's not spoken to his kid in 2 years or something. And it's kind of like this very, it's put in this very, very throwaway line, but it doesn't really come out in the play version, but in the movie version, it definitely comes out. And I think there's some staging in here, but I think it is very much left to, it's mostly phrased on how, what the third juror says, and then the 8th juror's response to it. But the third juror eventually starts comparing this boy that they're about to sentence that he wants to sentence to death, to his own child that he no longer has a relationship with. And what we eventually get to is that the greatest prejudice here is not his own racism, it is not his own classism, it is the fact that he is comparing this boy to his own son that he wishes were dead. right? Because of all these, you know, we don't get a lot of information, but presumably horrible things that his own child has done, and that, you know, these boys, quote unquote, have no respect and have no, you give everything to them and they don't give you anything back, right? And therefore they deserve to die. And it is only after this realization that it is his own personal vengeance that is coming forward. Does he say the not guilty, and then we get the not guilty verdict. You know, of course, there is no understanding of what the truth actually is, right? We as the audience never get to know whether the 16-year-old boy did actually kill his own father, and all these witnesses were telling partial truths, or if these were partial truths that then led to a massive lie that it was the boy that killed his own father, right? So yeah, lots of stuff there. Fascinating character study, very interesting. In my own personal thoughts and things, it should be noted that I don't think that anything like this could ever exist within a modern society, right? At least in the modern way that our judicial system works. We're already getting to the point of where, like, right, we are creating media that is around artificial intelligence taking over judge, jury, and executioner, right? There is a number of years ago, I feel like there was like, I don't know if it was a drama or if it was a comedy, but it was about a guy who got arrested and then wouldn't, I've only seen clips of it. Yeah, he got arrested and then he had to try to prove that he was innocent and he couldn't, but he was only being allowed to talk to AI. In the near future, there's the Chris Pratt movie, which is effectively the same thing, but is very clearly much more a drama. Where, you know, that's the way that we feel that we are going, right? Is that we don't want this concept of beyond reasonable doubt, right? Because we don't know what that means. We want a clear-cut yes or no answer. And we want what is very similar to my understanding of the way that a lot of what is traditionally seen in a number of other cultures, which is that to get to the point of where there is a trial is that the person is guilty and they must prove their innocence, right? And, you know, it's people's jobs that rely on that. And so the concept now becomes, if you are ever at that point, you are guilty and you must prove your innocence, not that you are innocent and that other people must prove that you have done it. Yeah. It's also a thing of where, right, the whole concept and the whole idea of going to trial just doesn't exist anymore in the same way. Because there have been so many precedents set with taking plea deals and bargain deals and, you know, doing things that are going to give you a moderate sentence outside of court. The idea of going to court just doesn't exist anymore in the same way. Especially with a jury deliberation. Also with a jury deliberation, where, like, the case is not this massive public ordeal, right? Because that's the other part of this, is that the concept of juries and trials and, right, none of that is, it is no longer a thing that occurs that is also private, right, is so public in the way that these things happen now. Yeah. 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 So yeah, it is a fascinating take on character studies, a fascinating take on the way that our jury system is supposed to work. And it is a fascinating concept based around this one really, really simple phrase of beyond a reasonable doubt. And that if there is any doubt in a jury's mind, then they should vote not guilty. But that's not the way that's not the way it practically works, unfortunately. Because we also have this other fun issue, which is a topic that is I found out about probably 2 or 3 years ago. I've just never really talked about, but like it's the CSI effect. I think that's what they officially call it, of where prosecutions have a way harder time now when they get to trial achieving guilty verdicts, because people expect from shows like CSI and Criminal Minds and yada 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 that there's going to be this abundance of evidence and DNA evidence and photographs and things. Whenever that's just not the case. That's not how the world works. Even if we are constantly surrounded by technology and things tracking us and where we are, right? The abundance of evidence that some juries want is just not reasonable, and things that would have gotten people guilty verdicts 20 years ago no longer achieve those same verdicts because there is a massive amount of evidence that is wanted, because people think that there's this amount of evidence because of shows like CSI and Criminal Minds and yada yada yada. But that's that. That is 12 Angry Men by Reginald Rose. Yeah.